We're good. So, welcome to the very first rant. We are going to be talking about being an all rounder, as Sean Matt Cubing suggested yesterday, I believe. Um, so, there are a lot of things to touch on here, and I'm going to try to limit this to 10 minutes, maybe like a little bit longer. But so for those who don't know, all rounding is essentially being fairly balanced in your skill level in all or most events. Um, this usually applies to WCA events, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Balancing skill in the 17 WCA events. So basically, the first thing I'll probably talk about is just dividing up the skills that are required. Different events have different skill sets, and I think there are a few different categories that there are to touch on. So, I guess the first and most, and I guess the most commonly, categorized events are what people call the kitty events. I just call them the TPS events, and in that category, I consider 2x2 Pyraminx, Square 1, Scube, and 3 Blind. Those events are heavily reliant on your turning skill more than anything, and it's really just about knowing a lot of algorithms, um, knowing a lot of algorithms, turning really fast, and just really being optimized in that way. It's very easy to plan large amounts to solve at a time, so it's less about look ahead and skills like that. And then next set of events is the long-sided events. So this is big cubes and megaminx. I'm going to say 5 through 7 in mega, which are highly dependent on selection, where a lot of the solve comes down to choosing the most efficient group of pieces to solve at any given time. In the next group of events, which I'll just call the medium length look ahead based events, 3x3, 4x4, and OH. And also clocks in the TPS events, by the way. 3-4 OH. Those events, you don't have as much selection, either that or in certain steps when you do have selection, it matters less what you're selecting and more how you do what you do actually practice. So there's that, yeah. And then finally you have long quiet events. So four blind, 5 blind, multi-blind FMC, which is based on largely like theoretical skill. I'd actually divide up long blinds and FMC into separate categories. It just feels weird to have FMC as its own category, but it really is. So basically, yeah, that's how I divide the events. And essentially, with each group, with one kind of glaring exception, improving at one of those events would greatly increase your skill in the other events in that category. So like practicing 3x3 will make you better at OH to a certain extent, and 4x4. Because the skills are very similar. The one group where this doesn't apply as much is the TPS events, because it's so based on algorithms which are generally specific to the puzzles. Additionally, the turning styles for each one of the TPS events are very different. Like 2x2 turning is very, very different from 3 blind turning, as are the others, especially clock turning. But yeah, essentially what you want to do is kind of just one of the most effective ways to like improve as an all-rounder is to go for multiple of these groups at once. Don't just go and like practice all of the short events at one time like that. Like sure, you'll get pretty good at the short events, but you're just like letting your progress in the other categories stagnate. And like it's very commonly known that practicing one big cube will make you better at the others, right? So you just need to extend this logic to the less obvious groups of events like yeah, it's yeah. Basically, yeah, and then I guess so one thing that's coming up in chat, Sasha Human says, is talking about how they want to be an all-rounder but don't like certain events. And I guess this is one big barrier to all-rounding. It's something that I think I should probably talk about. So my personal philosophy when it comes to like liking events is that, I just like cubing for the satisfaction of solving puzzles. It doesn't matter what the puzzle is really. I just like solving them. So for me, no WCA event is really bad. Like, I'd say generally, if you're able to sustain practice, even if you're not a huge fan of solving the puzzle, then like a little bit of like forcing yourself to practice. Don't go overboard, but that can be fine. But yeah, it can lead to burnout. But yeah, I guess I could also talk about my personal like improvement through being an all-rounder, because I think that's something people want to hear about. Like, you know, basically, yeah, like most cubers, I started the main event that I practiced and tried to improve at. Near the beginning of my cubing career was 3x3. And yeah, like I practiced that, much more than any other event, and got, pretty fast at it, probably down to like 13 before I started working on other things. And with that, like as an all-rounder, I think, starting as a specialist is completely fine. Like it's perfectly acceptable to branch out later. And then yeah, after that, clock was the next event that I jumped to really. I started getting pretty fast. I picked up a clock one day and just did solves, and yeah, I probably got down to like 8 seconds. This was in summer of 2016, by the way. Yeah. But basically, after that, I just added events gradually, and I think that's the way to go with starting out, is just, like, just add events in as you learn them. I learned how to do every event pretty quickly after starting, but I just didn't really take off with the actual speed part for a little while and some. But basically, yeah, with sustaining afterwards, you want to, yeah, I'd say probably the biggest thing that helped me was rotating events. I often will just switch out what events I'm practicing, like pretty frequently. Not frequently to the point where I won't experience improvement in the events, of course, but I will spend a month practicing an event like Pyraminx, and then I'll go to a comp, get a good result for that time, and then let it sit for a while. And during that time, I might switch to doing improving my OH times. So yeah, like that's the kind of thing that I do as an all-rounder, and I think it works very effectively. Like it's kept me at the top of Kinch ranks for a while. But yeah, like really all-rounding just comes down to a lot of like immersion into every event. Another thing that I think helps me is not being afraid of learning algs. Being a blinder was, I think, a smart move. It was a good play, because it helped me to be much less afraid of algs later on. I don't feel any pressure in like to learn algs more slowly. I think one thing that a lot of people tend to I think a thing that a lot of people overlook is sorry, I'm getting a little sidetracked. Just ban the dude. But yeah, one thing that I think people tend to get the impression of is that learning algs quickly is bad. and it's just not. You don't want to be afraid of learning algs quickly. Like everyone, I think a lot of people are very familiar with the notion that if you learn algs too quickly, you won't be able to recall them in solves. But you just need to like practice your algs. People don't practice their algs, and as a result, they don't have, the same. Yeah. But yes, Noah makes a good point as well. PRs are what you have at your peak. You don't need to sustain being 2.6 in pyraminx. You just need to get a 2.6 average, and then you can quit practice for a little while. And yeah. And you still sustain a lot of the skill. Like I could probably pick up a pyraminx and average low 3. But I would not be able to just smash out sub 3 averages like I was able to at one point. But anyway, back to the point. With algs, learn them as quickly as you're able to. There's no shame in doing them quickly. I felt really self-conscious doing that based on, the general advice of tutorials, like don't learn OLL in a week. I think a week is a very healthy time frame for OLL if you do it right. Yeah, and with blind, even if you don't consider commutators to be algs, there's stuff like the parity algs, which I knocked out in a day, and given they are setups to JPerms, but in essence, every single alg is some modification of another alg that you probably already know, and you need to find these sort of things. Look for setup moves. Look for algs you already know hidden in things. So, for example, this ZBLL, if people can see this, it's just soon with an inserted commutator, and you need to be able to find things like this. That's the main thing I'd say with algs. And of course, algs are going to be most important for the short events, and I'd say if that's something that's a concern for you, having to budget your alg learning time, put them into your short events. Go for EG2, TCLL, or if you don't know them yet, CLL, EG1 on 2x2. Go for NS algs. Go for PBLs on square one. All that sort of stuff. Oh yes, and I guess I'll just say one thing really quick about ZBLL. It's mostly easy RUD things. Don't be afraid of it. But in general, yeah, I think that about sums up the rant. Main takeaways, I guess, are all rounding is what you are at your peak, not something you sustain. You can practice events to their peak and then quit them for a period of time, and that still counts on your profile if you're thinking in terms of kinch ranks, which I think is a good measurement of all rounding. And then basically, if you're just starting out, you want to go for all events. Get into blind events. Getting into blind events early is probably a good idea. And then, like I was talking about earlier, you have these, different groupings of events that I consider in terms of skill sets. And, try to just diversify your practice within, shorter periods of time between those groups. And with that, basically, if no one has any questions or anything, then I think that will wrap up my first rant. This has been great. This is an experimental new thing I've been trying. I want to get this to be less formal, but I think this was good for this first time. I'll be totally up to extending this, talking in more depth on future streams and stuff, and good stuff. If you're viewing this on YouTube, be sure to come follow me on Twitch at Scalpel001. The link is in the description. It's been really fun, so thank you all.